Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're stepping into a gripping, honestly, kind of mysterious universe that takes everything we think we know about ghost stories and flips it entirely upside down. We're going to explore this fascinating narrative called reverse haunting. It's a story that treats the afterlife not as a place of judgment, but as an ecosystem governed entirely by the mechanics of memory, grief, and human attachment. It is an absolute thriller of a concept, so let's just get right into it. I want you to start by asking yourself a pretty provocative question. Can the living haunt the dead? Think about it. In all our traditional folklore, it's always the deceased who linger, right? They're the ones rattling chains, pacing hallways, unable to let go of the physical realm. But what if the exact opposite were true? What if our grief is actually a physical force that reaches right across the veil? Well, this brings us to a really chilling realization from Alaya, the medium at the center of our story. She drops this absolute bombshell of a truth on a recently deceased woman named Theresa. She says, "The living haunt the dead, and your daughter is haunting you." Man, what a hook. And here's the thing, Alaya isn't speaking metaphorically here, not at all. She's diagnosing a literal, terrifying reality of what obsessive grief actually does to the deceased. But to really get how this works, we need to understand the baseline rules of this universe first. Which brings us to Section 1, Rules of the After. The source material lays out these crucial ground rules for what it calls simply the after. First off, it's not heaven and it's not hell. Instead, it's this space shaped entirely by memory and attention. When you die, your consciousness continues, and other people's memories of you create these energetic threads or connections. When the living have gentle, fond thoughts about the deceased, those threads deliver a warm, peaceful pulse. It's nice, right? Because the ultimate goal for a dead soul is a slow, peaceful dissolution into the collective memory of all things. It's meant to be beautiful. But, as you're about to see, it really doesn't always work out that way. Okay, let's dive right into Section 2. What is reverse haunting? So the absolute core of this explainer is the definition of a reverse haunting. Basically, when a living person's grief becomes obsessive and desperate, when they literally just refuse to let go, it creates this violent physical pull on the dead. Instead of resting, the dead person gets yanked around by the sheer force of being remembered. Imagine a grieving daughter thinking about her deceased mother in her old apartment and simultaneously at her old office. The mother's soul literally fragments across those multiple locations. The living person's refusal to let go is actually destroying what's left of the dead person's consciousness. The contrast here is just devastating. In a traditional haunting, the dead cannot let go of the living. But in a reverse haunting, the living cannot let go of the dead. And the story gives us this deeply tragic case study of this with Theresa and her estranged daughter, Emily. Theresa died suddenly of a stroke, and Emily, who hadn't even spoken to her in 4 years, finds out she's gone. So Emily's unresolved guilt and her obsessive circling of her mother's apartment turns into this massive destructive force in the after. And this quote brilliantly illustrates the horrific physical toll it takes on the deceased. Theresa tells Alaya, "I feel like I'm coming apart, like I'm in multiple places at once." Theresa is experiencing agonizing pain. I mean, she's literally being stretched and erased, because Emily is unknowingly tearing her mother's soul apart across multiple locations in the after. Basically, Theresa is facing a second, complete erasure, a real death, if Emily doesn't stop. So how do we stop it? Section 3, the bridge ritual. Since Alaya can't exactly walk up to Emily and say, "Hey, your grief is physically destroying your mother's ghost," because, let's be real, nobody would believe her, she has to resort to magic. She creates what's called a bridge. It's a highly dangerous, tangible procedure. Step 1, she gathers an anchor object. In this case, it's Theresa's jewelry box that Emily took. Step 2, she establishes a protective circle with salt and herbs, stuff like mugwort and wormwood. And step 3, Alaya acts as the living conduit. She holds Emily's hand in the physical world and literally reaches into the after to grab Theresa, forcing Emily to viscerally, directly feel her dead mother's agonizing fragmentation. Now, what's really interesting about this is the brilliant metaphor Alaya uses to explain healthy versus destructive attachment. She tells Emily she needs to practice the open palm. This means experiencing grief as passing weather. You remember the person with kindness, and then you let the thought go. But Emily? Emily has been using a closed fist, experiencing grief as a haunting, obsessively holding on, and trapping her mother in this endless loop of suffering. During the bridge ritual, the sheer trauma of that connection finally breaks through to Emily. She feels the agonizing pain her mother is in, and it leads to this devastating gut punch of a realization. She says, I killed you twice. I couldn't let you go, so I killed you again. Slower, worse. It's just a horrific moment of empathy. But here's the kicker. Even knowing this, Emily's guilt is so deep that simply understanding the pain isn't enough to make her unclench her fist. She literally cannot let go, and it actually pushes her to the brink of suicide just so she can join her mother in the after. Which brings us to our next step, Section 4, the severance ritual. This is the nuclear option, the severance ritual. Alaya describes this to Emily as being like surgery without anesthesia. It's an act of extreme violence. When a living person cannot voluntarily release their grip on the dead, the medium has to step in and literally amputate the energetic bindings between their souls, using a ritual bone-handled blade. In the ritual, Alaya makes the connections visible as actual cords of light and energy, and she has to physically cut them one by one. Now, she leaves the cords of natural love and memory intact, but she must violently slice through these toxic connections. The cord of obsessive thought, which creates those endless mental loops, the cord of guilt, which wraps around Emily's throat like a noose, the cord of unfinished business, and finally, the thickest cord of all, grief as violence, where love has turned entirely destructive. Cutting these cords causes immense physical and spiritual pain to both the mother and the daughter, but guys, it is literally the only way to free Emily to live her life and allow to reset to peacefully dissolve. But all this magic comes at a price. Section 5, the medium's toll. After the sheer trauma of the severance ritual, Alaya is entirely depleted. And just when she thinks she understands exactly how this all works, we get hit with a massive lore twist. What happens when the dead don't want you to let go? This pivots us to our second case study, one that Alaya reluctantly takes on. A man named Robert is obsessively grieving his 28-year-old son David, who sadly died by suicide. Robert's intense, searching grief is fragmenting David in the after, exactly like Emily did to Theresa. But when Alaya crosses over to tell David that she's going to help his father let go, David actually stops her. David delivers this heartbreaking confession. He says, I don't want him to let go. When he thinks about me, I exist. When he stops, I'll dissolve. David was terrified of his existence in life, which led to his suicide. But now he is absolutely terrified of losing his identity in death. He actively prefers the agonizing pain of being fragmented by a reverse haunting over the absolute terror of dissolving into the collective memory. It's a mutual trap. The father's grief is destroying the son, but the son is using that exact grief as a lifeline to avoid true death. And this is exactly why this matters for Alaya, the medium. She's the one paying the price of being the knife between worlds. Her work requires immense physical and energetic depletion. She's plagued by these haunting dreams of cutting cords, literally hearing them snap in her sleep. She lives in deep isolation, lacking any real connection to the living world, because she spends all her time managing the trauma of the dead. She realizes that being the bridge leaves pieces of herself on the other side every single time. This whole story forces us to completely reevaluate what it means to hold on to the people we've lost. It takes the abstract concept of letting go and makes it a literal matter of spiritual life and death. So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If your grief was the only thing keeping a loved one from disappearing into the unknown, could you open your fist and let them go? Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the mechanics of the after. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.